Do you have one of Croatia's most valuable stamps? Let's explore. Ah, Croatia. A country known for Dalmatian dogs, the invention of the necktie, medieval cities, and when it comes to stamps, a postal history that gets surprisingly complicated. So which Croatian stamps are the most valuable and what makes them so desirable to collectors? We partnered with Scott Catalogs and pulled the 6 most valuable Croatian stamps, excluding errors and minor varieties. So open your albums, let's look at the top 6, starting from least to most valuable. Starting off the list, we have Scott 6, a 4-denomination ultramarine stamp issued in 1941 that catalogs unused at $15. And yes, there is already a lot for us to unpack here. Well, this is where we need a little bit of context because Croatia, as a stamp issuing entity, has really existed in 2 main periods, and those don't line up with the classic era of stamps. Most of the world's most expensive stamps come from before 1940, but Croatia's main stamp issues come from the Second World War and after its independence in 1991. So right away, we're working with a very different country. That said, we have a very interesting starting point because this stamp is an overprint. Overprints tell a story. They usually mean change, a shift in power, a new government, or a moment where something needed to happen quickly. So instead of designing a brand new stamp, you take an existing one, in this case a Yugoslavian stamp featuring King Peter II, the last king of Yugoslavia, and you overprint it with new text that I will not attempt to pronounce, but roughly translates to independent state of Croatia. And then at the bottom, you see these vertical bars. That's not a value. That's actually blocking out the word Yugoslavia, essentially removing the former country from the stamp. It's amazing what stamps can capture, and this could be sitting in your very own album because this one is affordable. Oh, and there's something else you may have noticed. We're starting with a perfect match. Number 6 is Scott 6. This is such an interesting start. I'm excited to see where Croatia takes us next. Alright, next up. What? This is a crypto stamp. This is Scott 1194, issued in 2020, cataloging at $15.50 used and unused. This is not what I was expecting, but I suppose that it makes sense. This is Croatia's first crypto stamp, issued to mark Stamp Day and the 180th anniversary of the penny black. And here's where things are supposed to get interesting. With this stamp, you're not just getting postage, you're also getting a digital token called posterium. The part that's used for paying for postage can be detached and used, while the digital part remains in the blockchain as the non-fungible token, or NFT. It's a collectible that can be owned, traded, or sold, translating traditional stamp collecting into the digital world. Croatia issued this stamp at the very start of the NFT hype, and I later made a video about NFT stamps, which I think actually aged quite well. So while this is probably a surprise to all of us, it actually reinforces something important. With Croatia's shorter stamp history, more modern and sometimes unusual issues like this one can sneak into the top 6. So from a chaotic World War II overprint to NFT hype, it's going to be a challenge for future episodes to beat this opening pair. Another one, this is Scott 1208, also issued in 2020. Used and unused, this stamp catalogs at $16.50. And yes, we are still in the crypto era. This was issued just 3 months after the first crypto stamp, and instead of depicting transportation and drones, this one shows different methods of postal delivery. They all came with QR codes, and I'll admit, I do find these interesting. I believe they actually sold pretty well when they were released. But if you're hoping for a hidden rarity here, let's keep going because we're not done yet.
It's not the rarest on the list, but it's the one I gladly lick. It's my personal pick.
Before we get to the top 3, it's time for my personal pick, a stamp I've chosen that has nothing to do with value and everything to do with why we love stamps. My personal pick is Scott 306, issued in 1996, with an unused catalog value of 65 cents. This is an awesome stamp, one with a wonderful connection to our hobby. A pair of tongs holding a stamp with a Croatian checkerboard, a national symbol, alongside the dates 1991 to 1996, celebrating 5 years of Croatian postage since independence. But it's also doing something else. It's celebrating the joy of stamp collecting itself. Like a lot of collectors, I get excited when stamp collecting makes an appearance on the very thing that we collect. And while the stamp shown in the image isn't meant to represent a specific 1991 issue and is more of a symbolic design, I still count it as a stamp on a stamp, a super popular theme in philately. And so of course, this definitely belongs in my growing collection of stamps on stamps. Nicely done, Croatia. Alright, we're now in the top 3 and whew, it's not a crypto. We're headed back to 1941 with Scott 7. This is a 5 denomination dark blue stamp with an unused value of $18.50. It's a higher denomination than the first stamp we looked at, the ultramarine Scott 6. So naturally fewer were needed and they're a bit less common to find. Next, we move one number up in the Scott catalog. This is Scott 8, a 550 denomination dark violet brown. Again, an overprint issued from 1941 with an unused value of $22.50. This is actually the highest denomination from that original set of 8 stamps. I'll admit that I'm a little disappointed that the later overprints didn't make this list. These later overprints that came shortly after the initial set, they're actually very cool and would make for an attractive album page. But still, Scott 1 through 8 are still a major part of Croatian philatelic history. Now there is something important to watch for when you're looking through the Scott catalog. There are minor varieties that can be worth a lot more money. For example, Scott 1 has an inverted overprint, cataloging at $225. And several stamps, including Scott 8, have double overprints that can reach around $110. So if you come across one of these early Croatian stamps and that overprint looks a little off, you might be looking at something far more valuable than expected. And here it is, the top value stamp from Croatia. This is Scott B76. This is actually a set of 3 stamps that we'll represent here as the souvenir sheet listing, issued in 1944 with a used and unused value of $1,650. These are semi-postals as indicated by the plus sign on each stamp, with an added surcharge that supported the 1st Croatian Storm Division. These were issued in brick red, sepia, and deep blue, and depict soldiers of the Storm Division in action, along with the division's emblem. And what makes these especially interesting is that they sit at the intersection of history, propaganda, and fundraising. These aren't just stamps, they were designed to communicate a message and support a cause at the same time. You can find these selling close to catalog value on auction sites today, and they are an incredible piece of history. They were actively supporting a war effort, serving as a means of fundraising for the front lines. Collectors and historians preserve these artifacts that ultimately tell a complicated story. Notice that individually, Scott lists these stamps at $175 unused, but $190 used, which really speaks to them as historical artifacts. Those used stamps aren't just preserved, they actually were used in their time. And yes, one of these stamps is a bit graphic. Put this side by side with a crypto stamp and wow, Croatia has been a wild episode. So there they are, some of Croatia's most valuable stamps and one personal pick. Together, they give Croatia a total take of $1,738.65 in Scott catalog value, which places Croatia under Argentina in 5th and final place in this series so far. But this actually introduces a new tier, because this leaderboard isn't just about the most valuable countries to collect, it's also highlighting the most accessible. There's a very real chance right now that several of you watching actually own one of Croatia's most valuable stamps, and that's a pretty cool thing to say. Now, that brings us to the end of this episode, which is brought to you by Scott, the worldwide leader in stamp listings and stamp values. Visit scottstamp.com to explore catalogs, collecting guides, and everything you need for your collecting journey. So, do you have one of these stamps? Which country should we explore next? Let us know in the comments. As always, thank you for watching and happy exploring.